In my previous video, my daughter Gamer Girl said that she wanted some false julii cories, and we had no problems. You know, my local fish store happened to be keeping some. We went in, they all looked very active and healthy. They had had them for 3 weeks, so we took a school of 6 of them home, and I had set up a 10-gallon quarantine tank, put it in the quarantine medication trio, and that was that, right? Well, for the first few days, I noticed that the false julii cories were all huddled in a corner, often hiding behind the sponge filter. I thought maybe this is a shyer species than I thought. I don't know, I've never kept this fish before. But by day 3, got our first cory death. This happens in quarantine. So I went ahead and tested the water. It's a quarantine tank. I hadn't been feeding them any food because they were being treated with the quarantine med trio. So it was like 0 across the board for nitrogen waste. 0 ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. Okay, day 4, another cory death. Wow, this is not looking good. However, I guess the positive side was that some of the cories were now starting to be a little more active. They weren't always huddled in the corner. And then by day 5, they were all active and looking for food and acting like everything was normal. After thinking about it for a while, I believe what they were experiencing was Corydoras self-poisoning. And this is because when I bought them from the fish store, they came in the fish bag, like all 6 of them, and I put them inside of the Aquarium Co-Op insulated bag, and I went out to dinner with my family. And, you know, they were hanging inside the restaurant on my chair, and then after we finished dinner, I took them home, and then I put them in the quarantine tank. Now, what is Corydoras self-poisoning? Basically, if you've noticed, cories have this like pectoral spine that sticks out from the side, and they can release a toxin from kind of the armpit area, like where the pectoral spine meets the body of the cory. And the reason why they do that is because in the wild, you know, a predator might, let's say, bite them or eat the cory. The cory's spine would stick into the side of its mouth. It releases the poison, and that goes into the predator's mouth or the wound, and then the predator lets the cory go. And then because they're in a big river system, that toxin gets swept out the river, no problems for the cory, right? It's a self-defense mechanism. Well, in captivity, when we have them inside of a fish bag, and let's say they get shipped to you, or in my case, I take them home from the fish store, and when they are stressed, they will release this poison, and the poison has nowhere to go. And so I'm taking a lot of this information from Dr. Eric Thompson. He has an excellent talk over here that's, unfortunately, it's a members only video from Aquarium Co-Op. But if you're willing to spend $5, you can see his talk as well as many, many other talks by lots of cool experts on all sorts of different topics. Anyways, what he said is a lot of times, let's say they're in the fish bag or even a small tank, if the poison is released, the water will kind of look whitish cloudy. If it's the small tank and you have like, you know, a sponge filter going, you may see foaming at the top of the water. That's often a sign that chemically something's going on with the water. The cories will start to swim funny, lie on their side, have a lot of trouble breathing or gasping, and then death can occur in as little as 1 to 2 minutes. Now, in my case, I think what happened was, again, I think they had mild poisoning in the bag, not enough to cause the instant 1 to 2 minute death, but mild poisoning in the bag. And then when I brought them home, remember how they were all huddled? I think all of them were experiencing like basically toxic burns on their gills and other parts of their body. And then 2 of them didn't make it. However, the 4 of them ended up surviving, and then they were able to swim and eat, and now they're doing well upstairs in the 15-gallon cube in my daughter's tank. So how do we prevent self-poisoning? Dr. Thomas was mostly talking to people who would be shipping their cories, and so he recommended before you put them in the shipping bag to actually put them maybe in a catch cup or specimen container with some aquarium water. Stress them out by kind of shaking the container a little bit. They will release that toxin, quickly dump out the water, and then give them fresh water inside of the fish bag. And so most likely they will have expelled all that poison, and there will be no more left for them to re-poison the bag until they make more. Other things you can do would be put fewer cories per fish bag, maybe even like 1 per fish bag if you're afraid of that happening. You can use maybe opaque bags so that they can't see outside of the bag and get really stressed out by what they see, as well as maybe adding like cut off a small chunk of like activated carbon sponge or maybe polyfill, which is known to absorb toxins and other impurities in the water. If you're like me and you're buying the cories, I would definitely recommend that you take them home right away. No dilly-dallying, no going to eat at a restaurant first. If you are driving a long distance, maybe the local fish store isn't so local and you're having to drive a long ways, consider maybe having like a couple buckets of water. So maybe the cories are in a bucket of water and then it's a larger volume than a fish bag. So then if they poison the water, then it will be a little more diluted, and then maybe partway through the trip, shift them over, net them out, and put them in another bucket with fresh water, and so that way they won't poison that water. So that might be something to think about. As for how to treat the cories after they've self-poisoned themselves, Dr. Thomas didn't have a lot of recommendations. He said, just give them lots of fresh water, a lot of aeration as well, just kind of hope for the best. Unfortunately, for me, I put them in a brand new quarantine tank. It was 10 gallons of fresh water. There was a sponge filter going, lots of aeration, and I did dump out all of the water that was in the bag. So I think, again, that's why 2 of them succumbed a few days later from the wounds, and then the rest of them ended up recovering, thankfully. Now you would think that would be the end of my troubles, right? But now we only have 4 false julii cories, so I figured that school was a little bit too small. So we went back to the fish store, got 3 more, which were significantly larger in size than our first batch, as well as 2 regular Pristella tetras that are silver colored. And this time I put them straight into the quarantine tank, right? But I did notice that when the employee was catching them, one of the cory's pectoral spines got caught in the net and he kind of had to shake it to get it into the bag, and that ended up damaging that pectoral fin. So when I came home, I saw that one of the cory's, his little pectoral spine, had a puff of fungus at the end of it, as well as in the armpit area, it was very red on the body and looked like infection was starting to set in. So since I've had really good luck with using aquarium salt to treat fungus, I decided to follow the Aquarium Co-Op guidelines for how to use aquarium salt as medication, and I used level 1, which is the mildest concentration. It's compared to often Neosporin, it's a antibacterial ointment, right? Not very strong. And that level is 1 tablespoon of salt for every 3 gallons of water. And I figured, we'll start really low and we'll see what happens. And then I was like, oh, I forgot, I also need to add the Quarantine Med Trio. Well, by day 2, that cory that had been injured ended up dying. And I was like, oh gosh, maybe he had some internal injuries that were worse than I thought. However, 3 days later, another false julii cory was having buoyancy issues and then started laying down, and it passed away as well. Same thing, I tested the water, no traces of nitrogen because I had just done a big water change before adding them in. What is going on? So my hypothesis is it's gotta be something with the salt, because when I've treated those false julii cories, I ended up having to get more after that because they kept dying on me, right? And so when I treated them with just the quarantine medication trio, no problems at all. So it's either the salt or maybe the combination of salt interacting with the quarantine med trio. I'm not exactly sure. Bob from Steampod Aquatics actually has a video on treating Corydoras with salt. He goes into all the details about how they have scutes instead of scales, so they're not really scaleless fish. But he uses a concentration of 1 or 2 tablespoons of salt per 10 gallons, and then he only treats it for about 24 to 48 hours. Versus I had about 3 1/3 tablespoons of salt for 10 gallons, and I had it in there for 5 days before I realized, oh wow, the second cory died. I'm gonna do a massive water change and try to get as much salt out as possible. And as soon as I did the water change, none of the other cories ended up dying. So take that as you will. So yeah, who knew I was gonna learn so much from the kids' tank in terms of take cories home as soon as possible, make sure to be careful when dosing salt. The final count in that tank is 8 Pristella tetras, 2 of each color, purple, green, yellow, and now the regular silver. We've got Snowy the mystery snail, as well as, final count, 7 false julii cories have made it through quarantine and are now healthy and eating and doing fantastic. Make sure to stay tuned to our next video when I'm gonna teach you and Gamer Girl how we feed the fish as well as clean them on a regular basis. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.